The advice that I would say to anybody who has a website is invest in SEO, attend the conferences, get a consultant or an expert. We are really fortunate enough to work with Neil Patel's team.
So you're in your office at work today, I guess, yeah?
I am, yes.
Okay. How have you been?
I've been doing really well. It's been an amazing year so far, off to a really great start. Lots of exciting things on the way. So excited to catch up.
Briefly glanced over your notes and you kind of want to talk about challenges. Now, are we going to be talking specifically about Ascent? Like what's the plan?
Yeah. So what I was thinking about with the challenges with rising costs and also the SEO side, I wanted to chat rising costs specifically about Ascent, but also kind of tips and things that other people can do, that kind of advice component about ways to get around the rising costs, because anybody who's playing in the Google paid space right now is hurting and suffering. The costs are astronomical. That channel, some of our partners are trying to charge upwards in PPC, trying to charge upwards of 40% more year over year. And so that's a common theme. It's just become much more expensive to play in that space in paid search. And so kind of talking about ways that we're combating that with finding lead funnels that are more cost effective and earlier in the customer journey. And I think that's something that other folks can use. I also wanted to talk about the co-branded campaigns and how we've been using that to kind of share our costs and our audience and our database with other sites that have a similar audience where we're promoting their brand, they're promoting ours, and it's kind of a trade. So that's a great way that we found to build our lead funnel and for a very low cost. And then also that co-opetition I mentioned last time. So those were kind of some of the topics. And then on the SEO side, I mean, there's major sites. We're not recording right now, right? This is just talking points. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like have this out there, but like major publishers like NerdWallet, Forbes Advisor, they've taken major hits on SEO. And that's been a huge, I mean, even certain keywords there, Google won't even rank them right now. So that's been a big challenge. And so I think understanding the penalties with Google and ways that publishers are trying to get around that, and advertisers that work with publishers. So I wanted to kind of talk about that. Also talk about how the trend where Google's really favoring user generated content. So you see Reddit really creeping up in a lot of the search results these days, where a few years ago, Reddit really was a much lower down the ranking. And then also, yeah, it's great because it's user generated content, but unfortunately that also allows a lot of misinformation, right? It's not a verified expert. These are people that are, saying what they want. And so it's important for brands to start to participate on that forum. So that was something I was going to talk about. And then also just with SEO, before the holy grail is obviously, number one, but if you're in the top 10, you're still getting traffic. And now with how Google has allowed so many ads, plus how AI is generating search above the organic search results, you really have to be in the top 5 to have it be anything meaningful. So it's been a lot more competitive, and just talking about how, SEO is not a set it and forget it. It's an ongoing strategy that you really need to maintain and nurture because it's continually evolving. And Google right now is favoring brands kind of over these content aggregators that have experts that are writing these articles. Now they're favoring the brands, they're favoring user generated content. So those were kind of the challenges. And I wanted to go back to AI because I think when we talk about trends, I think that's huge. And then also just transparency. I think how advertisers now are really being forced to disclose, hey, this is an advertisement. They used to have them more as advertorials or have these kind of roundups, especially in the fintech space or any type of service space. They have these rankings, and typically whoever was paying the most got to be at the top. And now that's changed. There's hefty penalties from the government. Also, Google's penalizing a lot of partners for that. And so just finding ways around that by, growing relationships with content teams, making sure your reviews are accurate, the importance of, customer reviews. So those were kind of the things I was going to go into that. Again, I felt like I rambled a little too much last time and did a lot about my experience. So I wanted to kind of condense my experience into 3 chapters for you and get more on the challenges and trends instead this time around. And I have extra time. So I was running short last time and I was like, I've got to go. And so I booked time after. So I don't know if you have a hard stop, but I can go a little bit longer if we need. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I love the name Unreasonably Optimistic because I've been accused of that throughout my career. I've been really fortunate over the last 23 years to really focus on what I love, which is growth hacking through creative campaigns to help brands that make a positive impact on the world. I started my career many, many years ago, and I chose marketing because I wanted something that was creative, but also practical. And so it's really amazing where you can do a campaign and reach potentially millions of people. And that really appealed to me. When I was 19, I got my start in marketing. And it was an accidental start. I was trying to find a job to pay for my living expenses during the summer. And I wanted to work for the gym at San Diego State. And I walked into the wrong office and I walked out with an application for a marketing role there. So I was very fortunate at a very young age to start getting real world experience managing all of the sports programs and the gym for San Diego State University. And that kind of catapulted a 10-year career in sports marketing. I went on to work for Active Network, Heritage Golf Group, as well as Roadrunner Sports. And when I was working at Roadrunner Sports, one of the favorite things was working with partners. So I had the privilege of working with Nike, Asics, Adidas, Puma, and doing these major campaign launches. And through that, I learned the importance of analytics and the importance of collaboration and cohesiveness and omni-channel marketing to really optimize the brand. And then my second chapter of my career, I would say that was really pivotal, was when I went into a totally different industry and I worked for Tony Robbins. And I was his digital marketing manager. So I managed all of our PPC, all of our SEO, and all of our social media and our campaigns. And while I was working there, it was really transformative. I developed my passion for mentorship and professional development, which has carried me through in my career today. I actually volunteer for the Aztec Mentor Program at San Diego State and really enjoy giving back to young marketing students that are learning as well. And I've learned so many things from Tony, but one of the big things that was one of my key successes there was our holiday campaign, where we grew 131% year over year. And it was because we collaborated so strongly with the sales team and the coaching teams. And I think sometimes in companies, there can be kind of this dissonance between marketing and sales, and really they're your strongest allies. And so we really worked together to brainstorm on ideas for what is our customer going to want, what's going to be the best value add for the campaign, and then setting up a calendar and collaborating. And I think that that's an area where a lot of marketers don't realize your sales team, your customer service team is one of your most valuable assets, and they can really tell you about the customer. And sometimes us marketing folks, we have great ideas, but we don't deal with the customer as much as someone in sales or customer service. So, that was a big, aha in my career that I definitely, took along the way. And then my kind of, I wouldn't say final chapter, but my current chapter is back in 2016, I got approached by a company called Ascent Funding to be their director of marketing for a concept. They're a fintech startup company, and their core value premise was student success and helping students. We didn't even have a website. We had a very remedial logo. So I did everything from creating the brand and the brand guidelines to launching the website. I've launched over probably 18 websites throughout my career. So a lot of website launching, not scared of that at all, but it was definitely a challenge to build this brand from the ground up when you have competitors that have been established for decades in the space. And since then, I've been promoted. So now I'm the vice president of demand generation and partnerships for Ascent. So I focus really on top of funnel. And I find that to be my happy place. And so that's kind of the transition of my career of where I've been and where I am today.
Yeah, you've really kind of landed in that balance of sort of sales and marketing.
I love it. It's definitely my sweet spot for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've had a career arc, right? You've kind of done sort of that local stuff and then working for somebody like Tony Robbins. And then now you're in the fintech space. They're all different. They've all got some similarities, but mostly it's a pretty varied experience that you've got there. It's interesting. So what do you kind of find are sort of the biggest challenges maybe with Ascent and what you guys are trying to do, going from being a startup to sort of where you are now? Like, what are the things that you're experiencing? What are some of the problems you're trying to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, again, going back to your title, Unreasonably Optimistic, it's, how do you not set limits on yourself so you can grow? When we started, we literally had no sales or no loans and no students to help. And now we've grown to 1.4 billion over the course of 8 years. And that is exponential growth. And the reason is because we're always looking at new ways to innovate and finding ways to get in maybe where our competitors are not. And you have to be really creative. And I'd say that one of the biggest challenges for us this year and for a lot of marketers in the last 12 months was really rising costs. Anybody who's in the pay to play space where you're working with partners or affiliates or using a pay per click type campaign model, it's become very, very expensive. And so there's been a few ways that we've been able to combat that. One way is with our partners, we find ways to negotiate deals that are more mid funnel metrics. So instead of doing a payout on the final funded loan amount or paying them per click, we do something like a cost per approval, where both the publisher and the advertiser have skin in the game, where each are incentivized to do well. I think that really helps kind of drive down the cost and align partners on the same level. In addition, another thing that we've done is to look at our lead funnel and try to build relationships with our audience earlier in the journey. So because we're targeting college students specifically, one of the areas that we like to help students is by reaching out to high school students. That funnel is significantly less expensive, and it also is a way to help them in their journey build that brand affinity when all we're giving them is information and scholarships. And then hopefully, if they do need money, then they'll think about Ascent. And so that's a way to kind of get around those rising costs. We've also seen a lot of success with co-op campaigns, and I highly recommend that partner any company that is looking to build an audience in a cost-effective way with a low budget, but they have a large audience. We found ways to do giveaways and structure scholarships with some major players out there. And all we do is we co-host the giveaway. We promote it to our database, and that way they get brand exposure. They promote it to their database, and we get leads. So it's a really great reciprocal relationship that doesn't have really heavy fees to get started. And then the last thing is what I like to call co-opetition. It's so expensive to acquire a lead. And so what we do is we partner with our competition because we are very well known for being able to help students that others cannot help. And so the right thing to do for our competition, instead of just turning those students and families away, is to send them to us. And then we compensate them for that. And it's a great way to kind of recoup that sunk cost. So also as a business, if you have spent and invested all this money in these leads that you're never going to be able to convert, you can actually turn that into a revenue stream by referring them to another company that could potentially, leverage those leads and turn them into a business model.
That's really smart. There's I was doing some research yesterday and kind of building a narrative around the idea of transitional, CTAs, and the fact that most businesses have like just this direct CTA, and they're not thinking about the funnel. Right. They're not thinking about the fact that, there's less than 2% of the people that are going to actually click the buy now or get a quote or whatever it is. And most people need something else, right? Whether it's trust or whether it's familiarity or whether it's information or, whatever. That's 98% of the people need that. And when you're talking about costs, you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, well, the cost is going up, but the only call to action we have is towards this bottom funnel. And if you're not capturing data at other levels of the funnel, then obviously that cost gets worse, right, as you go. Or if you're not thinking about what you guys are doing, where you're going to people that are pre-need, right? Or they're not problem aware at this point. And you're starting to let them know who you are, because you talked, earlier about Google and brands, and we'll talk some more about that in a minute. But like that, people buy from the brands they recognize. It doesn't matter if that brand's better or not. If it's, all things being equal, a brand they know and a brand they don't know, they pick the brand they know.
100%.
Yeah. So I think those are all things that companies need to be thinking about when it comes to like, how are we going to grow our market, or how are we going to mitigate rising costs that are out of our hand? Getting creative. Your what do you call it? Competitive. What's your word for it?
Co-opetition.
Co-opetition. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
And another area too that is, a challenge in the opposite spectrum of paid media is SEO. And it's always, and that's kind of another challenge that we're tackling, that I think any company that has a website is dealing with challenges in SEO right now. Google has rocked our world over the last 2 years with some major algorithm updates. And that affects not only the brand, but also the publishers and the partners of the brand. And things are shaking up. And I think with any challenge, with any disruption, there's opportunity. And I think that that's where the optimists really get to excel in these environments, is when okay, this is an opportunity for me. And with SEO, I think there is a farce. A lot of people think, oh, SEO, it's free, right? It is such an investment in time. SEO is not a one and done thing. It is constantly evolving, and it is one of the most competitive spaces. And a couple years ago, if you were doing in the top 10, you were doing pretty well. But now, with the way that Google has enabled more ads, plus we have AI chiming in on search, those top 10 results, they don't mean what they used to for traffic, for brands and websites. And so now it's really, how do you get in those top 5? And we've seen Google penalize major publishers in the last couple months and last couple years for not adhering to their policies, for not being as transparent. We've also seen ways where user-generated content, if you think about Reddit, for example, that is in predominantly, I would say for me personally, just anything I search, probably about 80% of the time I will see Reddit in probably my top 10 results. And so this is user-generated content. And so now you have this user-generated content from Reddit ranking over, very well-researched and well-established articles and journalists. And so now it's become a bit of a free-for-all. And so a couple questions are, is your brand participating on Reddit? Are you in these forums? Are you following what people are saying? Are you a part of the conversation? I feel like Reddit is kind of like social media 2.0. It's a new area, and especially when you look at the age demographic that's starting to be attracted to Reddit, it's growing and it's expanding. And so you now have people in their 40s and 50s that are going on Reddit, and even if they're not participating in the forums, they're consuming that content. And so those are some of the big changes, I think, and challenges. And for us, the advice that I would say to anybody who has a website is invest in SEO, attend the conferences, get a consultant or an expert. We are really fortunate enough to work with Neil Patel's team. So if you're familiar with Neil Patel, he's a guru in the space. I saw him probably about 8 years ago at the Traffic and Conversion Summit, and I said, I have to work with this guy. And his team's been phenomenal to work with. But we have a team of experts, and we also have some people internally working on SEO. So it is definitely a beast, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. But if it's done right, the rewards are exponential.
Yeah. I have a question about Reddit for you. Do you go and do you click on the results for Reddit?
I click on the results, but I do not contribute. So I'm one of the looky-loos on Reddit, and it depends on the topic. There's things that it depends on what I'm researching, because if it's kind of just a high-level question, I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, but I don't trust Reddit. I will use it to inspire me, just like AI, right? It's like we get the search result, you verify. So I will use Reddit for inspiration and maybe to hear kind of like what's trending, what are some of these things, but I will do my research because these are individual people and they may not be experts, they may not be right. And so that is a cautionary tale with all social media, with all forums is, get the information, get inspired, but do your research because, it's not verified. It's not always 100% accurate.
The times I've used it, it's honestly, I don't click on the results anymore. I'm really surprised Google serves them up so much.
I know. It's amazing.
Because the answers they're not great.
Yeah.
and oftentimes, like you said, it's wrong. It's not from anybody that they're not any, that you don't know who they are. Everybody's pretty much anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like taking life advice from Twitter or X, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? Like that's such a
Yeah.
wasteland. I mean, you can find some stuff that's interesting and you can
Right.
find some stuff that's right and you can find experts there. But by and large, right, 99% of what's on X is just made up nonsense. And I kind of get the same thing from Reddit too. Like I
And,
just
and and that's why it's important too for brands to participate and be aware, because Reddit is becoming, at least in our industry, it's becoming almost like a social media platform, and
oh for
people
sure.
can sing your praises or blast your brand. And so you need to manage that just as you would with Google reviews or anything else, so that you can make sure that you can combat any misinformation about your brand.
Yeah, no, there's opportunity there, but I
Mhm.
do think it's interesting how poor the results can be and how
Yeah.
much Google seems to favor these results. And
Yes.
Google doesn't do anything that's not in its best interest.
Mhm.
And so I'm real curious as to the ultimate why on all that. But anyways,
And I think there is a default trust, because we trust Google, and by default we think, oh, these are the best results for us. If it's not an ad, you have this kind of, I think, false sense of security. And at the end of the day, just because Google is ranking it doesn't necessarily mean you should trust it. So it's definitely, something for brands to watch out for.
did personally, do you use, where does AI fall in your toolkit for search? Like how do you use AI?
Yeah. So with AI, it's interesting. We've been seeing, we rely heavily, so we use the Google Suite for our analytics, and Google Search Console isn't even addressing AI, which seems ridiculous to me. So usually with Google Search Console, it'll tell you things you can do and tips to optimize. And currently they don't address that. And so we monitor AI. We've actually seen even student loans come. Chat GPT loves us, which is great. And again, we don't know why. we have very favorable rankings and reviews and positive ratings, and so we assume that that's why Chat GPT, based on what they're able to scrape, is favoring us. And so we have seen some student loans come from that, and it's crazy to me to think that someone is going to determine how they fund their future through AI. And that is how much AI has, power over people, and how quickly AI has been adopted. And so, so far it's great for us. Now, there are some watchouts though. So our company, we're a fintech company, so finance technology company. We deal with PII, which is personally identifiable information.
Mhm.
That is sacred. We are a highly compliant team. So we have to be very selective in the company about what AI is used for and where AI is used for. Now, there's a lot of companies out there that can use AI for customer service, to figure out lead flows, figure out how to qualify, and to have kind of a ranking matrix. AI can do all of that now. And if you're in an industry where you are compliant and don't have to worry about, PII, then, by all means, I think that's a very interesting way. We have used AI and kind of tinkered with AI for chat, like chatbots and things like that, to help self-service. But I think it's also very important to make sure that the customer knows they're not dealing with a real person. And again, to make sure that you have an AI tool that you trust, that you vetted, that you're feeding only your data into it, only your FAQs, only your policies and procedures, because it's a huge liability. It's an exciting time though. And I think everybody should learn about AI and understand how it could impact their role, from developers to copywriters to designers. There's so much, even sometimes with a LinkedIn post that I'm going to write, I'll type it into Chat GPT. How can I make this more concise? How do I make this more playful? And I mean, it really does make us better, but it's not us. And so I think that that's an important distinction, is that AI does need, somebody to prompt it, right?
Mhm.
So how do you write? And that's actually, I think, a role that's going to be very profitable and kind of an up and coming role. When people say, oh, AI is going to replace writers and content writers. And sure, I mean, even my interns, I say, see if, check AI, help you with your outline. It's a good tool to use. But the prompts, I think, are the most important thing, because it's how do you request it? What are you putting in to that question? How are you phrasing it? What's your desired result? So I think there's going to be some interesting new jobs created from AI with kind of prompt writers and finding better ways, more intelligent ways to write prompts to get the results. I love using AI for meetings, meeting recaps. There's a lot of folks out there that I'll hop on a partner call and they have their AI tool that's joining. And that's another thing too, is I feel like you should always make sure that your partner is on board being recorded. I've been kind of surprised with some AI recording tools, and if it's a conversation that you don't want to have documented or that could potentially get outside the company, don't use AI. So you need to be very considerate of what you use it for and make sure that you're compliant and make sure that you're not letting AI drive you and you're driving the AI and the results.
No, I use it pretty much daily for all kinds of tasks, and it hallucinates, right? Like it gets it gets math wrong. Somebody explained it this way, and it's what it is. I mean, AI is just 3 years old, right? Yeah. You need to treat it like a 3-year-old child when you talk to it.
I love that.
And that's really the way that it is. It's like you have to repeat things and you have to remind things, and it helps if you're polite to it, right? If you get angry with it, it doesn't always respond very well. So, but it can do a lot for us, but you have to realize it doesn't. If you think AI is going to replace you, then you're replaceable.
Love that.
So I just made that up.
Like
Trademarked. So, I mean, talking about AI, what kind of trends, are you guys seeing, or what are you seeing even that's maybe, underutilized opportunities
with AI specifically?
Just in general, what? Yep.
Yeah, some other trends that we've been seeing in our industry that and any major publisher or major brand has probably noticed this as well, that uses advertisers. But there's been a huge shift and a call for greater transparency. There's been regulatory agencies that are requiring better disclosures for consumers. And I think that that's one of the areas that we've seen things shift a lot, where typically before these sites would have reviews and roundups and say, these are the best products, of 2024 or 2023. And they weren't really ranked in order of the best products. They were ranked typically based on who paid out the most. And there's usually a very small advertiser disclosure at the bottom of the page that nobody sees. And those days are over. So now the disclosure's at the top of the page. We've seen major publishers start to shift how they've split their company. So I have some partners where I deal with the business development team, and then I have a completely separate team for content. And the two never interact. So the content team will never be influenced by how much a partner is getting paid. And we've seen a lot of sites that are starting to default to ranking based on reviews from their content team, as opposed to ranking based on, oh, this is the most popular, aka the one that's at the top that's getting paid the most. And of course, who's ever number one is going to be the most popular, because that's what you click on first. So I think greater transparency in disclosing to consumers. I think also reviews, and even Google tends to favor brands that have higher reviews and better reviews. And so I think that, and verified reviews, Trustpilot's great. We're actually migrating over to Trustpilot very soon, so that you actually have verified reviews that are actual customers, because there are people that game the system, even in Google, with reviews. And so I think that greater level of transparency. And then again, kind of going back to the SEO conversation, before, we were trusting this, journalist or this expert. And now people are trusting more. If you even just think about Amazon and how many times you look at a customer review and a verified review, because sure, someone can say this product is great, but you're going to trust what 1,000 other people have said. And so I think the growing importance of reviews and authenticated reviews is also something that's really important. And I think transparency is only going to continue to grow. And Google has been penalizing brands that are not transparent and forthcoming with their content and their rankings and reviews. And so now you're seeing Google get a little bit more involved in people's business. It's not just what you're writing on the page, but it's how it's displayed, how you're communicating that to the consumer. So I think those are some really interesting trends as well. And I think people really need to invest in staying top of making sure, A, if you're an advertiser, is your site compliant? Are you, leaving yourself open for a lawsuit if you're not having the right disclosures? And then also as a brand, making sure that you have relationships, that you monitor your reviews. There's a great tool we use called Visual Ping. And any page that has a review of Ascent, we have that tagged so that if there's ever a change on that page, we're automatically notified. So then that way, if there is positive information, great. And we know, hey, our review went from 4.8 to 5 stars. Or if there's negative information or they didn't change our rates, we can stay on top of it. So I think that that's, another kind of tip for people as well to kind of stay on top of it.
Absolutely. Let's kind of go back to AI for a second. I want, I'd like to kind of, from a marketing perspective, let's kind of dig into some tactical stuff. Like what are some ways that you guys have leveraged AI and you've seen a good ROI from it?
Yeah. So I would say from our perspective, it's mostly on the content side and also on ideation and thought creation. So there are some ways where we've done a lot of webinars, and that's also a great pro tip for co-branding. If you can find another brand to collaborate with to do a webinar, that's always a great lead generation funnel. But we have our own research and we have our own experts. But what we'll also do is we'll work with AI to say, hey, this is kind of our outline. This is our flow. What else would you potentially add? And then we research it, because again, to your point, AI can be be tricky at times. We also have leveraged AI in certain cases to help with branding and imagery and logos and things like that. I think on the image generation and creation, there's also a really cool thing that we're working on with media kits for partners. And through AI, you can just swap out the logo and customize it with their logo in an instant, instead of having to use all these designers to do that. So I think from our side, because we are so compliant, mostly it's on the image and design and copy creation. And it also helps, we leverage interns because interns are our target audience. So you're very rare that, a company gets an intern and an intern is actually your target audience. And they're using it to help write blog ideas and finding ways to kind of be more concise or to kind of build out these outlines. So again, we use it to help build the structure, but it's not writing it for us, if that makes sense. So we're definitely finding ways to use it to help kind of either enhance what we've already written or find ways to help build the structure for long form content that would normally take a lot longer to create. And then lastly, too, I do believe our developers use it as well to check code, which is, I think that honestly, AI and the developer world, where you talk about if AI could replace you, I think that that's an area that's really going to get rocked by AI, because you have complex code and now AI can check things and create things very, very quickly. So I think that that's an industry where folks are really going to have to evolve and pivot, because I do think that that can be a big area of being more expedient in a process that might take a lot longer when you have a single coder or developer.
Yeah, no, it definitely, I mean, with anything, it speeds things up. Mm-hmm. I think for, from the content perspective, and this is, and I don't have experience with writing code with it. I mean, my code is, I tell people it's like a language. And if it's a language, then I speak Spanglish when it comes to writing code. But I really think that it creates another challenge for you when it comes to like ideation or planning, is that I can create so much content so quickly,
Mhm.
right? Like, okay, give me this outline. Now break this down this way. Now give me this. Now give me that. That can be almost like paralysis in its own right and can
Yeah.
slow down the process in a lot of ways because then you've got all this data that you've got to go mine through and then you got to reorganize it. And then, because you've got to
Mhm.
prompt the AI to tell you to talk about how to do it.
Right.
And then you have to go through and you're like, all right, I need you to fix this. Stop putting emojis in everything. You gotta, you just gotta remind like over and over and
Yeah.
over again. It's amazing.
And I think it's also, I mean, I this is just my personal opinion, but I get paranoid if it's an exact sentence from AI. I don't know, that could have been pulled from somebody else. So is that an original thought? Are you opening yourself up? Copyright infringements, that's a huge concern with AI. And so, I just feel like do your homework. Use AI to help you, but don't have it do everything for you because and again, like I said, with us exploring live chat and chat bots and things like that, I think that makes total sense. But you're disclosing you're not chatting with a live person. This is our bot. This is our tool. And so I think that those are some areas where I think if you're using AI now, if you're writing an outline, you don't need to say I used AI to do this outline. But if you're using a chat bot, people should know they're chatting with a bot. They should not think they're chatting with someone unique that's an individual.
Unfortunately, a lot of people fall in the middle of the bell curve.
Yeah. Very true.
Well, this has been really interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you've talked about, in terms of costs and SEO and kind of how people are dealing with SEO now and how fast I think that industry is changing really, really, really quickly. I was asking earlier about how you used AI and it's like for me now, I don't even go to recipe sites anymore. One, because they're so just littered with ads and pop-ups and all this stuff. Like you can't, like I just want to see the stupid
Right.
freaking recipe. Now I just go ask ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, I need a recipe for whatever, right? And it knocks stuff out for you. And you go, okay, give me a variation of that. And then this is how I've used it recently. I've said, all right, I want you to build me a meal plan for the week. I only want to cook twice. And then it'll build out the meal plan for you. And you're like, perfect. Now organize all the ingredients I need by where they're going to be in the grocery store. So I don't have to like walk around. And then it gives you an ingredients list that's like, here's where all the vegetables are. Here's where all the fruit is. Here's where this piece is. So you have this logical plan of like where to go through and do it. And I think it's things like that where that it's going to take away from websites and take away from search and take, just where it's like, this is so much easier because then I don't have to go look at 56 recipes for lunch tomorrow. I'm like, I just want somebody to tell me what to eat and move on.
You may have just changed how my household does cooking from here on out. So thank you for that pro tip. I will remember that one.
Oh no, it's amazing. Like you could even go in and say, all right, I weigh this much. I want these macros in the food, like this much protein, this many carbs, this much fat. Now build out the thing for me. And it's pretty close. Like it misses some stuff, but it's pretty close. And then you can tell it to do tell me where to shop for all of it.
I love that.
It's amazing. Well, I didn't mean to kind of go off the rails on talking about recipes and stuff like that, but
that was fun. I'm gonna totally do that going forward.
please steal it. There's going to be other things now. We're going to be like, I can have it do this for me too.
Good life hack.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's kind of up against it with Google, and it's such a tough deal where you might spend a year getting yourself ranked into the top 5 and then an algorithm change moves you out of it with no recourse. We've seen it as an agency where we'll do the exact same thing for 10 sites and 5 of them get penalized and 5 of them don't. And there's no rhyme or reason to why one thing would happen or the other. And I think that's a cautionary tale, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's a situation where it's like, if your goal is to rank, if that's your goal and what you're doing, then you're likely going to get punished at some point, right? One way or another. But if ranking is a byproduct of everything else that you're doing, then you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're not just looking for that one thing. But that's a really, really, really tough thing. So anyways. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yes, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, anybody's got any questions, what's the best way to do it?
Best way is just find me on LinkedIn. It's Lauren Eileen Garner at Ascent Funding. So just type in those words and I should pop right up.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.